Welcome to the Writer Syndrome podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode, we're getting into character names. I'm Russ. That is Tim. Tim.
Russ.
How are you?
Oh, not bad.
Yeah.
Why'd your mom choose your name?
Oh, do we really want to go down this path?
Come on, you're a character. How were you named?
My dad listens to this, you know.
Oh.
I was named, well, you know the truth about my first name. You know, Russell's just my middle name.
You're a liar.
I'm a liar. That's
You're
right.
wearing a mask.
I am. I'm a liar. No, my middle name is my dad's middle name. And my first name is just a letter. I was going to do this to you. Would you reverse the...
I wanted to jump in because your name is way more interesting than mine.
Yeah. Well, long story short, it was going to be David or Daniel, and it ended up just becoming D. D period is my first name.
D period Russ.
Russell. Yeah.
And yet you did not put that on your book.
I didn't. I got a lot of pressure to do so, and I said no.
Because it'd be Dr. Capasso.
Yeah, the DR Capasso. People sometimes think I'm a doctor because they see my initials. I'm like, I am not a doctor. But
you're a doctor of life.
I mean, I'll pretend to be one in the moment, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm not a character, so we're gonna get.
No, you're a real person.
I'm a real living boy, Tim. So we're gonna get into character names. I'm curious, your character names. What was your? Did you think much about it? Was it something that just came to you? Did you use real life people to name it after? Time?
I didn't.
All of it.
Yeah. So, man, it's a combo of things for me. Since mine's a period piece, because publishers are dying for period horror pieces right now. Anyway, it takes place in the late 70s. So I did kind of go through, popular names, not of the 70s, but when of the characters would have been born kind of based on their age.
Yep.
So I went through census information. I kind of limited myself to like top 50. I didn't want to do too many deep cuts because they get a little wacky the further you get down. You get things like Tim and Russ. My mains was one. It's like my main character's name is Judy of my previous piece. And Judy was a relatively popular name at the time.
Yep.
So my main is a reference to a Ramones song. Okay. And it's also a name that I've kind of been fond of, like Judy or Judith. So her friend, Seven, is kind of based on punk names of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where folks would be referred to as a number.
Yep.
His given name is Steven, which punk name would be Seven.
I was just going to ask if you had like a real name. Did you go through like surnames and everything for all your characters too?
No, not all.
No.
And then Buttons is only Buttons.
Yeah.
I don't think I gave him an actual name, another punk name. Honestly, and I guarantee you there was probably punks in the 70s named Buttons, by their friends. I think the nicknames were super popular at the time. So,
well, and that's also tied to he's actually got like a jacket with buttons on it, right?
He's got a jacket with buttons on it.
It's kind of part of his thing. So it's like one of those nicknames that people would just give you and you kind of earn over time of just being like, that's the guy with all the buttons in his jacket.
That's the guy got a bunch of buttons. This guy loves buttons. Yeah. You're Buttons now. Forever.
So that's kind of like your three main characters, or like your secondary and tertiary characters. Did you put a lot of effort in naming them and
once again, I really relied a lot on the census and this sounds really weird, but just the sound of them and kind of what seemed like it was going to gel with the story. One of my other characters' names is Donna. My mom's name is Donna. It's not a reference to Donna. Yeah. It's just that this character to me embodied that kind of
name
in the 70s, of this punk girl. She doesn't have a punk name. So I do think much like the creation process about what you're writing about, what you omit, I think there's a feel for me about what names feel right. And now I've gone back and changed. I had a big issue with one of my secondary characters where I think I had called him Ray at one point, and then I just mixed the name up throughout the whole thing. It was a big first writer's issue where I had to go back and find consistency because I renamed him in the middle because I just didn't like the way it was working.
Yeah.
And it created such a consistency error. Over 400 pages trying to catch this name. I did control fine, but still, it was a pain in the tuchus.
Yeah, I had similar issues, and I'm going to have similar issues in this second book I'm working on. But my main character's name in the first draft was was not what it ended up being. Originally it was Ben, which was fitting, I think, for the character, but
Yeah.
I had too many Bens in my life. No offense to
Yeah.
all the Bens in my life, but like there's a certain name I'm like, well, I got to live with this character and this name for, for, you know.
I mean, it's a really interesting thing, right? Because you want to make sure that people don't feel like it's based on them. And obviously
Yeah.
it's not. But I think if you name a character after somebody that happens to be after somebody in your life,
Yeah.
I think you run that risk, Not that it's necessarily that big of a liability, like at the scale that we're at, but I always try to make sure that it's not a direct, because even though I'm using stories in a way from my past, like I have some really crummy characters do some really crummy things based on some really crummy people in my history.
Yeah.
I'm not using their name. I'm not using their story. They look completely different, but it's that instance and kind of how it affected me that comes out on the page. So I don't really want them to feel seen or doxed or something in that way.
Yeah, yeah, because then there's the association too of like using that name. It's like, well, this character isn't this person, but this person I see or talk to all the time in real life, but it's not them. So, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
you don't want to start pulling traits or something from them and be like, but that's not them. So yeah, and I changed my main character, and it ended up being like I was having such a hard time, and I was like, I came up with like a mashup. I was like, so the main character is Elliot Bishop, which I really enjoy that name. And it's a mashup of Elliot from Mr. Robot and Bishop from old Robert Redford Sneakers movie where his character's name was Bishop, which is like, I love that movie. And it's kind of like the comps I had, I think when I was writing early drafts. So I was like, well, that works out. Yeah. Also just the sound, I think, and some of my other characters everyone's got pretty much full names, first, last names, two of which are actual like, based on real people. One is a hockey player. I just like their last name.
Yeah.
And then another one's actually a friend of mine. I told him when I ran into him one time, I was like, hey, I used your last name. You okay with that? He's like, dude, that's awesome. That's totally fine. I was like, it just had a good sound to it. And I liked it. And originally it was in there as like a placeholder, but then it kind of grew on me. And I was like, this is kind of I don't know, just like, I like the hard consonant sound of it. And it was different from all the other names I had. And he was like, nah, man, that's awesome. So yeah. I think like that's coming to like a point of like the sound of a name and making sure, that kind of resonates with like the character as well, and when you're saying their name. So
one of my faults, I think, is, especially when I'm using like a full name, a last name, that the meaning of it is a little on the nose for me.
Yeah.
Did you think about that at all? Like, did you have first names or last names that were like sounded like other words or were, representative of character traits or something?
No.
Or the story itself?
Well, kind of, sort of. I mean, like, obviously Elliot, it was just more of like, I wanted a cool name / this is just like, it sounded good to me. So I went with that. I didn't look into like, the meaning of the names, and that didn't really play any part. I did do some research though on that. I think for like, starting the second book, looking at character names, which are probably all going to change because I'm now realizing I don't want to keep all these. But yeah, I didn't do too much into like the meaning of the names for this or like the themes. I think Lilo, which is like kind of her hacker name, is probably the closest because it's shortened for Linux loader. So I just took LI from Linux and LO from loader and kind of combined it. Yeah, so it's like, it's like a techie reference, and that's cool. It boots up the operating system, and I was like, it's kind of,
that's really clever
on theme for her. So.
And you don't specifically say it, right? That's kind of like for those who are familiar could deduce it, but that's, only a portion of your audience.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you Google search LILO, it'll come up. But, now also people who've read the book and are like, and they hear this, they'll know. But,
Lilo and Stitch comes up when I Google it. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's right. So yeah, that was like probably the only one I put like a little bit of thought into like making it clever with the character and who they are and what they're doing, and like, she's a hacker character, so I should do something like maybe tech reference. And this is like her handle anyways, so. Yep. I also just like the sound of it and at least the way I pronounce it.
Yeah.
Also, the biggest thing I was thinking about when I was doing this was, it's also just kind of like a general thing, is having character names start with different letters. So you don't have like a repeating of R's or K's or something like this. So that was something I actually really paid attention to in the first book. And it was just making sure that everyone's name started with a different letter, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important, because like that people will get a little hung up on that.
Yeah, I had that issue, I think, and I resolved it. Yeah, I mean, as far as mean, like name, mine, once again, it's just very on the nose. I remember being a kid, in my teens, and it's the 90s, and I remember writing like, I'm Malone, like Malone.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so my main character in the previous book is like Judy Malone. It's like Judy's alone, like she is isolated, even though kind of surrounded by people, and through the story, she is no longer alone,
yeah, yeah.
surrounded by the right people,
Yep.
but super duper on the nose. And I know I'm not alone.
Hmm.
In the new book, the last name for my main is Barry, and the idea it's Barry, but the idea is that they're kind of burying their past or their
Yeah.
emotions, and
Yep.
whereas his wife's name is Crystal, and where it's kind of like clear, and more what you see is what you get type of
Yep.
person. Which I think the character names themselves will make a lot of sense by the end of the journey.
It doesn't feel too on the nose until you explained it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a nice little subtle kind of thing. I think. I don't know.
And then they're kids, and these are super on the nose too. I've got like Arthur and Reed.
Okay.
So we got Art and Reed. It's like
Okay.
two ways to kind of deal with your past, So like the mains are dealing with their past through their kids. So I always end up shoving like a Thanksgiving turkey. I just shove meaning into my characters, maybe too much. I can't help it.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't think that would be too on the nose.
So I don't think it's eye rolly.
No.
But Malone is kind of eye rolly for like a teenager who feels isolated. But I can't help myself.
That was the last name though, right? So it's not like it's
a real last. That's the other thing too, is like, if I'm giving any advice at all, I wouldn't invent names. I wouldn't invent a last name. I wouldn't invent a first name. I am trying to use actual last names that just happen to coincide with the themes of my stories.
Yeah, unless you're writing like some crazy fantasy or sci-fi novel where you have to
Right.
one of the things I was like reading up was like, there's a lot of the same tips across the board, like which we've already covered, like, how does it sound?
Right.
Making sure all your characters have their names
Right
start with
about
different
fantasy and
letters.
sci-fi.
Start with different letters, but making sure it's pronounceable, which I know sci-fi and fantasy books. Sometimes I come across a name, I'm like, I'll just shorten it in my head because I'm like, I don't know what you're intending me to how to pronounce this. Ugh.
Yeah.
Even when right now I'm reading a James Patterson book, and like the villain's last name, like in my head, I actually watched like a trailer for the TV show and the movie to hear how they pronounce it. Because in my head, I'm like, this is not how I'm pronouncing this word at all. And I keep getting hung up on it because every time I read it, I'm like, is it Sunjai?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is driving me nuts. And now I'm just like, in my head, I just like Sun. That's it. I take the first three letters, and that's who it is. So yeah, yeah.
To that point, like I'm just about at the end of Don DeLillo book I'm reading, and I read the back cover, and it was like James Sutherland's father passed away, whatever else. So it gives the main character name, whatever it is. So I have that in my brain, but I am 90% sure that character's first name is not mentioned until the third act of the book. Because it's a first person narrative.
Yeah. So
and I saw it, and I was like, is this the first time that I've seen the character name in the whole book?
yeah.
Really interesting. I mean, I might have missed it, but regardless, it's incredibly sparse if it's in there. So when it's all about identity and past and history, so it makes sense. In a way, I kind of wish the back cover didn't plant it in my head.
And it always comes back to this too, is the reader and genre expectation too. Like that's like such a strong thing to have to consider when like naming characters.
Yes.
Like I think about all the characters of mine. I was like, oh, I've got an FBI agent. I've got a hacker. I've got all these characters that their names need to kind of fit within the genre of this espionage thriller, hacker thing,
Yeah.
So I don't know. And then you read like something like Jack Reacher. Like that's such a thriller name. Like what a great name for that character and for the thriller.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's something to think about as well. It's like the genre and reader expectation. You're going to open up a book, and you open up a Jack Reacher book. You're not looking for a Phil, maybe.
Yeah, like Phil Preacher.
Phil Preacher is like, no, I don't think that's not it. He's not imposing force,
I think there's something about consonants, right? Like, especially if you want the character to kind of be hard-nosed or hard-edged, that using consonants in the name like works a lot.
Yeah.
It's not like Eugene.
Yeah. Sorry, all Eugenes out there, but
Eugene Reacher. Gene Reacher.
Gene Reacher. That's a different.
That sounds a little.
It's different. A different genre. It's a different genre.
Different expectations for Gene Reacher.
But then the other problem too is like over reliance on like those types of names, right? It's like right now, like I don't know why I started like in my current book, like I have one of my characters' name is Jack, and it fits perfectly for who he is and everything he's doing. But I'm like, I can't name him that. But I'm just doing it right now because I haven't thought of something else different.
Yeah.
Some
like
that's gonna be
name.
Yeah, but it's gonna be annoying to have to go through and replace it. But it'll be fine. But it's like I'm not naming. We don't need another thriller or another book like this with another character named Jack. Like that's overused. Yeah. It's overplayed. You know. So it's kind of you're in a spot where you're needing to meet like the genre reader expectation, but also like trying to be a little bit different from everything else that's out there. Because
I mean, and I think you're right. If it's too referential or the name doesn't fit, you're taking your reader out of the story, right? You don't want it to be, look at me, this is a reference, or look at me, this is the coolest name in the world. So it's like a subtle balance, I think. But
also the association again, coming back to that, like what are the associations? Like if I keep this character's name Jack and he's a hitman, it's like people are going to start thinking, well, is he Jack Reacher or is he 6'5" and 200 pounds? Like, no, not really. Actually.
Or is this fan fiction? You know, this guy is really influenced by Jack Reacher.
Right. So like staying away from that stuff, which is something I'm like starting to think a little bit more about. Have you played around with any like name generators before?
No, I haven't. I really rely on like census data more than name generators.
I did a combination of the two. I'd use census data and then I would use a name generator for like some last name sometimes, mostly for like secondary and tertiary characters. But name generators are kind of fun, but sometimes they're a little goofy, depending on which one you're looking at. There's a ton of them out there. And I think they're a good starting point, but I don't know, like, there's some that will like provide you like the meaning behind all the names, which is kind of great. And I've used them just to kind of like see if I can spark some ideas. What's your take on naming every character?
I don't.
You don't? Okay.
I mean, you mean like tertiary characters, like scientist A, scientist
I'm talking like
B.
Like that's reserved for like Stephen King to do kind of thing. Whereas other people I'm reading, they're like, yeah, you don't name every single character. But it's like, well, like you got some authors who like the guy who's running the gas station's got a first, last name and a whole backstory.
Yeah.
We don't get the backstory part, but like the naming.
If it's important to the characters, they get a name.
Yeah.
If it's somebody walking down the street or somebody doing a job or something, and they're only in like a scene, they don't get a name for me. Yeah.
I ran into this, I was reading a scene the other day where two of my characters are like looking for someone and they come into like an old like general store out in the middle of nowhere, whatever. And they come across the shopkeeper. And I just like, at first I was just writing old shopkeeper. In my head, I was like, should I give this guy a name? And I was like, you know what? I don't think I have to, because he's only in this one scene. It's kind of an important scene. But he's only in this one scene, but the idea that I keep referring to him as like old man or shopkeeper is more a reflection of the character's view. Like, you know what I mean? Like my character who's in the point of view of right now is just like this old man or this old shopkeeper here, you know? And I think that's fine because I don't think he necessarily needs a name because he ends up dead in the scene later. Spoilers.
Yeah, I think like, especially for you, since you're writing in limited third, there's no real way to get that across organically. It would just be like bad exposition in a movie or something. It's like, and oh, hello, brother.
Yeah.
This is my brother James. You know, like you need to do it in dialogue or a name tag or
I was gonna say like
something.
Name tag. Yeah.
I've got the same thing. I've got like a misogynistic clerk. I don't give him a name. He's just a disgusting archetype, and I think that's okay because even though I write in omniscient third, it's still rooted in the character's experience. So I think that's fine. Also, like if the reader doesn't need to know it, I don't think you need to tell them. Whereas like I've got two kind of antagonistic characters with ridiculous names. One I've got, your archetypal general character. Yeah. General Thaddeus Bradley. This feels
so
like
great. So epic.
So epic. It's such a big name.
General Bradley.
But then his bud, calls him Thad. And then his bud is who runs a meat processing plant. His name's Guy Bowman, which feels like such like a
it's so fitting to me.
Hybrid of animal and man, like Guy Bowman or like bovine. I don't know. It felt like this guy to me.
I agree, by the way. Those names I thought were great because I read them. I was like, oh, this guy totally runs this plant, like 100%. In my head, I was like, I can picture this guy immediately, like who this person is just on their name. So,
and I can't even tell you, like those names, those weren't census and those weren't name generators. Those were like divined names. Like as I pictured, it was my brain. Like as I was thinking about these characters, those are the names that came up. So sometimes I think there is just kind of a roll of the dice with what fits. And even if, Guy was in the like 200th most popular name in like the 1940s or whenever this guy was born, I still use it because it just fit for me. It also seems like it's just, they're both very archetypal, names that embody the infrastructure that they represent, the military industrial complex and the meat and processing industry.
Yeah, I know, I agree. And I think that's something good to consider, which we talked about earlier, is like having a name that like fits the character and their personality. But like those names were like so good, I thought, and so spot on for describing. Like I can picture immediately what they looked like because they stood out and they're different. Like not a lot of people were named Guy, but then like Guy Bowman, I was like, this is just like exactly who I thought this would be. So I think it's something to consider because like we said, you wouldn't be Phil Reacher, that doesn't fit. So
I'm still laughing about Gene Reacher, dude.
Gene Reacher.
Gene Reacher.
Well, what's your take on handling? Did you have to do any like name changes mid-story? You didn't have to do that.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did, didn't you? Okay.
I did for the last one, yeah. And I hope to God I don't have to do it for the second one because it was just a pain.
Yeah.
I got confused as I was writing, in the moment. Even though I kind of had my name Bible, my brain just switched a character's name to something else that I guess fit better to me.
Yeah.
I think it was like Ron to Ray. That's what it was.
Oh, that's right.
And I was like, who the hell's Ron?
And what are they doing here? But
but
not name change in that sense. But that's a good point. But I mean, like actual characters in the story. Like, so I ran into an issue of so Lilo. That's like her hacker name, right? I don't reveal her real name. I don't think in Host. I think in the next book it'll come up, but she uses like when she talks to other people, she'll use like a fake name, like Emma. I kept using that as like her kind of ghost name, or her name that she would use to like just like, the face of people. Like she's not gonna reveal her. She's not gonna reveal her real name.
That sounds like it could be confusing.
Yeah,
I guess you just need to be really deliberate about it.
Yeah, and I think I did a pretty good job, and I kept it pretty limited too. Anytime it was used, it was always from her point of view, except for the opening chapter where I immediately cover like Elliot's like, oh, she calls herself quote unquote Emma. I don't know if that's even her real name, but that's like after they've already known her for a while. So it kind of sets the stage like, well, who is this mysterious person? So right there, you immediately know, okay, that's a cover name for this character. She might have another name later on. I kind of want to squash that. And then later on, I do it from her POV where she's like, saying she'll only, all these other people around her only know her as Emma. They won't really know her real name. So I think I kind of cover that pretty well. But that's like something I had to think about because like she does have to have like she can't just be using her handle and that'd be weird. And she's not gonna use her real name. So, but the reader knows her as this. So it's like, how do I track that and like separate that? But
yeah, no, I don't have that at all. The closest thing I have maybe is with my character Seven, who is belittled by the alpha buttons as being Steven sometimes. But I think it's kind of it only happens on a few occasions, so it's not like throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the new one, like I just want to keep the new books so simple and so straightforward. I'm thinking back to like reading Bird Box, which was fine. It's a good book, but there were moments where there was so many characters in one space with not enough to delineate them that I couldn't picture them. I didn't know who they were. Doesn't help that the book's about people who have blindfolds on. So I was just overwhelmed with character names in a room. And I feel like you need to be very selective about when you're naming certain people and just making sure that you're bringing them up into the forefront when it matters and when it's driving the story forward, not just to get a day in the life of what's happening in that moment. And I had a hard time with that when I had some scenes where I had like, 6 people around a fire or something. And it's like, how much do you focus on each of them and how often do you raise the names or not? I think it's a super delicate balance and
especially,
a little different. But.
Multiple people in the same scene all talking or throwing in something. I'm going to run into, now I'm thinking this more, for the book I'm working on now, I'm going to run into another issue where I'm going to have a main character whose name I'm going to use throughout the entire book isn't actually their real name again, because it's going to be like their cover name in a way.
Right.
So I think I need to be pretty deliberate and cautious of how I present that, and then revealing like their real name might be more of like kind of like maybe a twist type of thing that could work towards the end. But yeah, it's gonna be something I'm gonna have to think about. One, renaming the character, because we don't need another Jack in this world. And two, figuring out that cover name and then figuring out their real names. It's like I need to have like two different names for this character and making sure I present one and the other in a correct fashion where it doesn't confuse people. So
yep.
So I mean, I think that covers kind of like the general, top level of like character names. I think some of the things to consider, like kind of recapping all that stuff, is one, definitely the reader and genre expectation. Yeah. You're not going to have a Gene Reacher. You don't want a Jack Reacher in there. Choosing names that fit the character and their personality. I think, Tim, you got some good ones with your general and Guy Bowman. Like those characters, they fit what their jobs are. And it's like, oh, I can picture that immediately, and their personality. Which I think is one, a fun thing to do, and but something to consider. That way, it's like adds to like their kind of like layer. And once a reader comes across their name, they're gonna know immediately like, oh, I know what this person is or who they're like. Making sure you're fitting the time period too. I know you have a time period piece. So you're using like census data to look up names that fit the time. I do kind of combination of that and just names that sound good, because I think also names that sound fitting.
And even though it seems really common, I would say like when you're using the census data, just make sure you're not picking up, the most
two.
Well, yeah, the top two, I think, unless it really, really fits. But also, if your book takes place in 1982, you don't want the top names from 1982. You want the top names from, however old your character is, minus 1982. Right. So, sometime in the late 60s or whatever.
Yeah, and having characters with different first letters. That's a big one. I think I feel like I had like my first draft, like my characters all had like the same letter. I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah, you really want to make sure that you can have the reader delineate your characters. There needs to be a way to separate them. When I was reading Ghost Story, for 300 pages, it was kind of hard for me to tell the difference between a couple of the characters, because they just seemed they were kind of all old men with all old men names. Yeah. And I kept kind of having to backtrack and be like, who is this? What's their history again? Yeah.
And making sure they're pronounceable too.
Yeah. In the same respect, you can totally flood your reader with too many names. And then it just becomes like completely and utterly overwhelming, and you lose track and maybe don't care enough to figure it out. Or, if you're Game of Thrones and you need an appendix in the back to figure out who the heck you're talking about. Yeah. Or the girl with the dragon tattoo guy, right? That must have been completely and utterly overwhelming with character names and histories.
Yeah. Yes. It definitely was a little overwhelming, but still good. But
well, that's the genre. Maybe that's the genre expectations, right? He's a
true, because it's a crime thriller, so there's going to be a lot of names thrown in the hat for who's done what, right? And of course, then there's the Stephen King model where you give names to every single character, and in the next chapter you murder everyone. So then you don't have to worry about them.
I'll tell you with King's names, though. I feel like I think he's great at character names.
I think so too.
And even though he has huge towns and tons of names, the way that he spaces them, I never feel overwhelmed.
No, I don't.
He gives them all their own little piece and their story. He's not just like depositing information. He's like kind of crafting a tale. So I have no idea how to do that. Kudos to you, Stephen King.
That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. That's why we talk this through, right? And then thinking about meaning too. That's probably one of the top ones too. Think about like the actual meaning of the name.
And be gentle with it. I guess you want. I think it's okay to have meaning, but I guess you don't want it to take the reader out if it's too on the nose. Yeah, because I'm pointing at myself for doing that.
He's actually pointing at himself.
I feel like sometimes my names are comic booky. Like maybe too much so, but I do want them easy to differentiate between others. And how do you keep that? Authenticity or like realistic vibe while making them iconic in a way. I think it's a super delicate balance.
Well, I think that's it. I think it's all we have. I think have we run through the name generator here?
Character names. They're important, but don't let it stop you from writing. You can pick a dummy name, like you were saying, Russ. You got a Jack in there. Yep. You're not just sitting there and being like, well, I can't name this guy, so I'm not going to write today. Like, there goes his chapter.
Yes.
I think it's okay to have a placeholder. Don't let it hold you up. It may become clearer the further you get in, the more you learn about this character, what name might fit and what name might, you divine in that moment.
Yeah.
It happened to me, I think so. Don't let it be a hurdle.
Just make sure you're thorough with that Control F and
yeah, make sure you catch all the apostrophe S's or the S apostrophes.
Put their name in all like the brackets too. Maybe that'll help.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Good stuff. I'm now looking forward to renaming all my characters.
Can I tell you one of my other fears?
Sure.
Spiders. And I'm stealing your character names. I know. Because you know what?
You have a fear that you're stealing my character names?
Yeah, I think just since we're in close contact with one another, you know how I kind of like plotted out that vampire story that I didn't move on?
Yeah.
That kid's name was Elliot.
Oh, you son of a...
I know. Well, it's okay. I didn't go anywhere and I'd rename it. But do you have a Jacob in yours?
I do have a Jake.
A Jake.
Which is a bit a little overuse of a name. But
yeah, I got a Jacob.
I mean, it's short for Jacob.
And the next one.
It is short for Jacob. So
do I have to rename this character?
No, you can go for it. Lilo's real name's going to be Judy.
Shut up. No. I think I like Jacob. I don't know whether it was Jacob's Ladder.
Judy Bowman.
It just felt like very biblical Jacob.
Yeah.
Maybe Job. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, I think Jake was a leftover from my dad and I's conversation. It's my cousin's name.
But you didn't use Jacob specifically.
No, I don't think I used it in the book anywhere. But I mean, that's his real name is Jacob. Jacob Fisher, I think.
I'll take a long pause on it and see if I can find something more fitting.
You can do that. It's a name. It's not like you stole it from me. It's stole it from people.
I just like Jacob Barry. Jacob, Job, Barry. Yeah. I don't know at all.
Yeah. It's got like a little rhythm to it. Jacob, Barry, Job,
Peter, Parker,
Gibb. Yeah, the whole Barry.
Barry Gibb.
All right, so that's awesome. That's name stuff. Go ahead, name them. It's like naming children, but more fun, I guess. Not less permanent, or maybe
it's less traumatizing.
Less traumatizing. Just don't name your kid Guy Bowman.
If there's any Guy Bowmans out there listening, you got a great name.
You got a great name. Are you in the meatpacking industry?
In the meatpacking industry, Guy Bowman.
Reach out to us. Let us know. So what are you reading? What are you watching? Anything?
I'm at the tail end of 0K by DeLillo. I just picked up The Silence, also by DeLillo. 0K was amazing. Like it's sad. I got like 2 pages left. I just haven't plowed through. It was just such a wonderful book that walks this line of like literary fiction yet sci-fi a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I like absolute would aspire to write something that's like genre and literary mixed. Yeah. I love the hard right turns into the past or societal commentary, and it was a wonderful book. I think The Silence is a bit different by DeLillo. I think it's more like maybe vignettes. I don't know. The reviews of The Silence were not great. It's like short fiction by DeLillo, but I'm coming off such a high of reading this book that I wanted to read the next thing that he had written. He's just a talented writer, and I wanted to read. This is the most recent thing that he'd written. I think he released it, only a few years ago. So, and that's it for reading for now. And then watching? What am I watching?
I don't know. You tell me.
Nothing. I guess The Walking Dead on treadmills. That's nothing worth talking about. Just garbage filler.
Wow. Yeah. I kind of feel the same right now. I'm in the same spot. I couldn't. The last movie I probably saw was Furiosa. Is that crazy? No, that can't be right.
Oh, I saw The Inside Out too. That was good. Saw that with the kids.
Yeah, I don't think I've watched a movie since maybe Furiosa, a new movie at least. Watched the Saw movie other than bad movies for the other podcast, which is whatever.
You know what I don't like about Inside Out 2? I'll tell you. This is my hot Disney take.
Yeah,
is that the movie's making tons of money right now. It's like the highest grossing Pixar movie, which is crazy.
Good for Disney. That's such a good indie hit for them.
Yeah, good indie hit. Well, to that point, like I think it's the first movie or one of the first movies in this new cost savings measure. So we lost 2 very popular voice actors in Inside Out 2. They cut Mindy Kaling, I think, over contract negotiations.
Okay.
And they cut who's the actor that's in Barry?
Bill Hader?
Bill Hader, and they cut Bill Hader.
Really?
So they wouldn't pony up for, I think they gave them some really low ball offer.
Yeah.
And yet they're being rewarded financially for doing it. So I'm sure like during the presentation, they're going to be like, look at all these profits, and we didn't have to pay these people.
We have to pay these two people.
But it would have been nice for them to pay them.
Yeah. Did it change the experience of the movie? Because you know those voices, you know what, right?
Yeah, I think it did, to tell you the truth. I mean,
Right.
the replacements did just fine.
Yeah.
It's the name. I think it's like Uma Thurman's daughter, I think, was discussed, and I forget who was
Maya Hawke.
Yeah. She was fine. But yeah, it did. It changed the experience a little bit. It almost made it feel like if the story wasn't so good, it would have felt like it was made for Disney Plus or TV.
Yeah.
But luckily, like it hits the emotional notes. The writers just did an absolute bang up job. My kids loved it. My kids identified with it. It just hit all those right notes about growing up and puberty and anxiety. It's exactly where my daughters are kind of emotionally feeling right now, although they're not quite that old. So it was saved by the writing.
Yeah.
But it felt like a smaller story, and I think it was, and it's a short movie, it's for Pixar, and I loved it. It was like 96 minutes or something, hour and a half.
That's
Give it
beautiful.
to me. Like I don't want to be in the theater for 3 hours anymore.
That's beautiful. Minus 5 minutes of credits, you're out of there in an hour and a half. Let's go. Yeah.
Bing bong boom.
Lesson.
Anyway, so you're not watching anything?
I'm watching The Acolyte. I'm kind of caught up to that. I have to watch episode 7. I think just came out. But
you have like a new Kevin Costner Western to go see in the theater?
No. Horizon? No.
Didn't you watch his TV show?
Yellowstone? Yeah. After season 1, I was like, this is dumb.
Yeah, but how many seasons did you watch?
5. It's like 4.5 because they split 5 into 2 parts, which stop doing this, Hollywood. Stop. Just give us the season. Stop doing this part 2 stuff. Just give us the story. Like I'm done with that. I get it. I get what you're doing. I don't like it.
So would you recommend The Acolyte?
I would.
Star Wars show? Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. It's I would. It's painting an interesting picture for the Jedi. They're not good people. They kidnap children and turn them into
Oh, really? Yeah. It's like Halo.
It's they're I think it's pretty good. I'm enjoying it.
All right.
And it's like a martial arts like with lightsabers, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I know the finale is coming up. I watched the first couple episodes and I was like, that's okay. It's a
fun.
serviceable show.
It's I'll tell you, it's better than some of the other stuff they put out, and it's maybe a little bit predictable, but I mean,
I think I'm just still dealing with that Star Wars glut. I just have there's just a lot.
I totally was
of stuff.
I was on it. I took a break. I didn't even watch the movies for my annual birthday watch, Tim. Which I know. I was just done. I'm done.
He's all grown up.
I know. So, but yeah, that's all I've been watching. I haven't really watched any movies. Reading wise, I finished that Bad Luck and Trouble, the Jack Reacher book. Fine. I've read better Jack Reacher books. And I started reading Along Came a Spider by James Patterson. Because I've never read any of his stuff. And it's Alex Cross series, crime detective, police detective.
Alex Cross.
Yeah, right. I think
a good name.
That's a great name, right? Detective Alex Cross.
Alex Cross. Yeah,
that's a good name. So yeah, I'm enjoying that. I'm like halfway through. It's kind of cooking now. Like it starts a little slow, and then once you get to a point, you're like, wait, this isn't the end. Oh, okay, what's happening now? And kind of the book changes like at the 50% mark, where now it's becoming like a psychological thriller. Before it was like we need to go save the kids, and now it's something different. So. Yeah, it's been pretty much it. So I think what it is. I've replaced all my TV watching time with playing that Octopath Traveler game. That's why.
Whoa, you're really getting into that, huh?
Oh, I'm all in. Yeah, I just last night I played it. Like I think I've just been just like cozy little JRPG 16-bit style. Yeah,
Hashtag cozy.
I get my tea. I get up in my blanket.
You get a little blanket on.
Yeah, it's
98 degree sweltering weather.
Yes. It's a cool blanket, Tim. And I play my little Octopath Traveler, and it's fun. So
that's cool.
But that's it. That's
all we got.
That's all we got. Let's go name some. Let's go
name some more characters.
Let's go write some words right now. Okay.
So we're gonna create people.
We're done with this. Let's create people that we can go.
Gods of fiction.
Right. And wipe them off our fictional Earth.
Then we'll rename them halfway through.
The
character formerly known as.
I don't like this character
Ron.
anymore. Ron is now Ray. So that's our episode. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with the next episode with a new topic. We're going to get into pop culture references in books, which I think is going to be a fun and interesting one because I think you and I love pop culture references.
Yeah, I think it can be a huge weakness and a slight strength. So
yes, cautious.
Cautious. Pop culture.
Proceed with caution. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with somebody. That's the best thing you can do for us. You can follow us on Instagram at Writer Syndrome Books. We're not doing the most there, I'll be honest, but
yeah, me neither.
You should just do it anyways, because someday if we see more people follow, maybe more stuff will come. I know it's like a egg chicken thing, but you know. But you can find all of our episodes, and you can reach out to us if you're a author and you want to chat at writersyndrome.com.